everyone, it's Jo here from Time for Tea Designs with another video for you. In today's video I am sharing with you one of the demonstrations that I had prepared for Create and Craft this week, but I didn't get a chance to demonstrate on air. So I thought I would spend a bit of time doing that for you now and in a little bit more detail. So first of all, I'm using an A2 size card blank that's in this lovely deep green colour. I really like this colour for autumn and winter. And do look out for our bespoke A2 size card blanks coming soon. I've also taken a piece of my super smooth white cardstock and I've used the frame that is A2 size within the autumn cover plate die. And I've cut off the edges of that where the stitched line is, and that makes that slightly smaller than my card base. I'm taking the sentiment die, Home Sweet Home, and I'm just lining those 3 dies up in the top portion of that card panel. I'm taking the outer die that fits with the word sweet, and I've popped that in the middle of my 2 home sentiments. I'm going to pop those through my die cutting machine, and leaving those letters in place, I'm going to use some washi tape just to pick those up from the card. This will mean that they stay together and are perfectly positioned so that if I want to use them on another project, then they're already aligned perfectly. For the first sentiment, it hadn't cut fully, so I did have to run that through my die cutting machine again, and again I've just used the washi tape to remove that from the cardstock. The word sweet I've cut from some glitter cardstock, and this is really thick cardstock, so it did take a little bit of manipulation to remove from the piece of card, but once that was free, it makes for a really nice glittery sentiment. In order to give it some dimension, I've cut that sentiment as well from some black foam, and I'm just using my liquid glue then to attach the glitter cardstock on top, and we now have some dimension to our sentiment. Now I've got my letters cut out of my card panel, I want to add a little bit of interest with some splatters. So I've popped some of my Distress Oxide ink onto a large acrylic block. I've used the Seedless Preserve and the Aged Mahogany, and these 2 colours together make a really nice burgundy shade. So I've watered those down with my paintbrush, and I've just splattered some large splatters onto my card surface. I'm now going to use one of our small blender brushes to add some flicks which are much finer, so like a fine mist, almost like you've airbrushed those splatters onto your surface. And once I've cleaned up my area a little bit, I'm now going to take out some of my Finetec metallic paints, and I'm going to use that really bright gold so that matches the glitter that we're going to use for our sentiment. And I'm again adding some water with my paintbrush just to water that down so that it's of the sufficient consistency that we can get some really nice large splatters onto our background. And I'm just using the edge of my acrylic block there just to get a finer spray of that paint. Moving on now to our images, and I had already coloured some of these for the show, but what I wanted to show you for the images that we're going to use on the front of the card, I think the main ones to show you are how I coloured the armchair and how I did our little bear. So I'm not going to use the ones that we've already done, I'm actually going to stamp those again. So I've got some of our super smooth cardstock. This is alcohol friendly cardstock, and it is really great for colouring all of your images. So I'm going to stamp that on with some of my Memento Tuxedo black ink. I'm going to do that a couple of times just to make sure that I've got a really good impression, and I'm using my stamping platform to help me do that. So for our colours, I'm using some burgundy shades for the for the armchair, and then some nice chocolatey shades for our bear. And as always with my colouring, I do start with my lightest shade first. So I'm using the E23 to apply some colour all over my little bear's face, his paws, his body and his little feet. I'll then use the next shade up, the E25, just to add a little bit of definition to his body. So give the illusion of some curves by adding a darker shade around the outside of his face, his body and his paws. And while my ink is still wet and the paper is still a little bit saturated, I will go back over with my lightest shade to blend all of those harsh lines out. I'm using the darker shade of E27 to really apply a little bit of definition to where there is overlap with the book. For his little muzzle, I've used the E53 and E55, just really tiny little bits of colour. And then the E27 and E29 will colour the pads of his paws and his nose. Because it's such a small image, he's really very simple to colour, really quite quick, and he looks just so adorable. For his book, I'm using colours that coordinate with the rest of the images that I've already coloured. So I'm using the R02 and the R05 just to add a little bit of this orangey salmon shade to his book. And again, started with the lightest and then going back in and adding definition with that darker shade. The armchair is a really fun one to colour, and like I say, I'm using some burgundy shades. So the R56 and R59 are the only two colours really that I will use to add some colour to this chair. And I'm really being very, just really quickly adding colour to that background, really making sure that that image and the paper is saturated before I then go on with my darker shade. The R shades do tend to be really quite juicy, have a lot of ink in them, and there is a tendency for them to bleed. So if your paper is a little bit too wet, that might be a problem for you. In order to prevent that, giving them each layer a little bit of time to dry before you add the next one will really help with the bleed. So I'm going back over that dark shade where I've added those areas where there might be some shadow, and in the centre of the cushion on the seat of the chair where there might be a little indentation from the bear's bum, and gone back over those. And you can see I did have a little bit of bleed, so I did just blend that back out with my blender brush. So I'm letting the image dry a little bit now, and you can see how that ink has really bled through to the back of our cardstock. So that is really quite saturated. And before I add the decoration with the RV69, I did just allow that to dry a little bit. The video is sped up a little bit here, well, quite a bit. So we did let that dry for a little bit of time. So do just make sure that you have given that little bit of drying time. And then I can just add my little stripes and checks here. If my paper was still a little bit too wet at this point, then they would just blend into the background and wouldn't stand out quite so much. It's just really simple technique, but it really, really does work. And the key to that is just allowing that little bit of extra drying time. So now our images are coloured in, we can use the coordinating dies to cut those out. I'm just attaching those with a little bit of our washi tape so they don't move around in my die cutting machine. So now those images have cut out with that lovely crisp white line, which I really do love to see them once they've been popped out of the dies. And I'm going to use also the lamp table and the bookshelf to finish up our scene. And on the finished image of the little bear, I did add some glossy accents, so we will do that at the end. I'm going to add the panel now with the Home Sweet Home cut out of it with some shaker tape, and I'm using that because it is thin enough to fit in between those words. I don't want them to sag at all, so I'm making sure that I've applied enough foam to prevent that from happening. I can now add the word sweet that we cut out of our foam and glitter cardstock, and I'm using my liquid glue just to add that in the centre, and that gives us the same amount of dimension as we've got with our back panel. I'm taking the little bits of die cut that came out of the cardstock that we cut initially, just so that adds those little bits back onto the back of our card base. I just think that finishes it off a little bit, but you don't need to do that if you don't want to, or if you don't keep hold of those little bits. And we can now start assembling our scene. So I'm just using some of my liquid glue to add that shelf to the top, so it just sits on top of the H in the word home, and then some liquid glue to the armchair and the lamp table, and that completes the scene. So for the finishing touches, like I mentioned, a little bit of the white Jelly Roll pen will add some highlights to the bear and the chair. And then the finishing touch, which is really is the bit that I just think looks so cute, is that glossy accents on the glasses that really does make them shine. So they look a little bit milky until it's dried, but once that glossy accents is dried, it will be totally clear. And here's the one that I prepared earlier. So before we move on to the pictures, I do need to let you know about our competition, which was to give away 4 cards. The winners of our giveaway are Jenny Orchard, Petra M, Jess Brumby and Laura Ann. So please do get in touch and I'll get your cards out to you as soon as I can. Congratulations guys, and thank you for watching the Facebook Live on Thursday where this video was recorded. We'll be back again with more videos really soon, so do tune in every Thursday night to our Facebook Live, and if you did like the video, then it would be great if you could like and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you again for another video real soon. Bye now.